It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. Go get 'em, George.
Welcome to the mother of all talk shows, coming to you live from the lee of the Great Wall of China. 21,000 kilometers of it, stretching, if it were to be stretched, half the circumference of the world, from London to Sydney, from the east coast to the west coast of the United States, 5 times over. China's always been great, you know. But unfortunately, the barbarians that the wall was designed to keep out have merely changed their tunics. They're still out to get China. But nowadays, it's the People's Liberation Army, Navy, and Air Force that keep them at bay. It was 73 years ago this very day when, in the name of liberty and democracy, Great Britain and the United States overthrew the elected democratic government of Iran. Whatever happened next, we'll be deep diving and exploring all of these issues, because this is the mother of all talk shows. Stay tuned. It is a remarkable piece of work, the Great Wall of China. I haven't walked it all yet, but I'll probably finish walking it before this Iran war is finally over. But more of that in just a minute. China was always rich. China was always its own world, its own civilization, needing precious little from anybody else. People were always envious, jealous of China's civilizational force. People were always trying to tear it down, break it up, and, well, get some of that wealth for themselves. If you think about it, some things change, but most things remain exactly the same. And these are exactly the imperatives that drive Western policymakers and policemen at Gatwick Airport when they're arresting 72-year-old pensioners like me. It is the unwillingness to accept that China China, not us, not the West, not the Europeans who for 500 years ruled the roost in the world, invading anyone, anywhere at will, stealing their things, killing their people, destroying their civilizations. For 500-600 years we did that. And it was unacceptable for the elites of the European powers, later Europe and North America, that they should be able, within their own territory, helpfully enclosed in a wall, do exactly as they pleased. Ban opium if they liked. Refuse British Empire opium if they chose. China would not kowtow to the invading barbarians, and, well, there was a century and a bit of humiliation in which China was forced not just to kowtow but dismember itself, allow itself to be taken by foreigners, but those days are well and truly past. And just in case anyone thinks that that's because they've got a communist government, let me tell you, this is a sovereign decision of the people of China. The people of China, I see them in numbers unimaginable to those of you who haven't yet been to China. I see them queuing up at the national monuments. I see them queuing up at the foundational stones of the Communist Party of China. If you are dreaming, any of you in the Western chancelleries, that the Chinese Communist Party is going to fall from power, you better wise up. There's 105 million members of the Communist Party of China, and they ain't going anywhere. So it's better, I've always thought, to accept, as Canute actually did, gets a bad rep, you know, that the waves will come in, whatever you say, whatever headline in the Financial Times or the Economist you contrive, the waves will come in. The sun will rise in the morning in the east. And it's better to come to terms with it. See if you can't, cut a deal about it. Speaking of deals, it just occurred to me, not half an hour ago, that this is the actual anniversary to the day, 73 years ago. So almost in my lifetime, I was probably in my mother's tummy when it happened. The British and the Americans overthrew the elected Prime Minister of Iran and his democratic and socialist government, secular as you like. Imagine, it was a democratic and socialist government that was overthrown by your government and mine because it had the gall to seek sovereignty, to say, unless we can control the major source of wealth in our country, which happens to be oil, black gold, then we are not a sovereign, independent country at all. And if we're going to control it, we will have to own it. Because if BP, as it then was not, but later became, owns the oil under our soil, it's their oil and not ours. And so Dr. Mossadegh, as part of his election program, on which he won power, decided to take into public control for the Iranian people as a whole the petroleum reserves beneath their feet. I know, sounds terribly radical, revolutionary. How dare they? Well, for the same reason that the Chinese built the wall. They wanted to be secure, to enjoy what God had given them. But they didn't last long. And on this very day, my ancestors, if you're an American, your ancestors, your governments, your states, created a coup d'etat to overthrow Mossadegh. I never met him, of course, never knew him. He lived out his life under house arrest thereafter. But I did know the widow of his foreign minister, Mr. Fatemi. And she told me a story that I found so difficult to believe, I had to go and check it. Her husband, and she was telling me this sitting in Harrods in London, her husband was executed by the British. The foreign minister of Iran was executed by the British state. There she was telling me the story, sitting in London, with me, a member of the British Parliament at the time. It is almost impossible to believe the crimes of imperialism, not in dim and distant past. You know, we're talking about the 1950s in this case. And so the enmity of the colonial powers of countries like China, of countries like Iran, are both ancient and modern, and they are for the same reason. As I said on Sunday night, empire is merely robbery with violence, extreme violence if necessary. And it doesn't matter whether you've got a government that is elected or a government that seized power, it doesn't matter. They will crush you. For all their talk of democracy and liberty, that's for the birds. I'm really hoping that before I shuffle off this mortal coil, it will be plain and evident to almost everyone that our countries are merely thieves with violence. And they keep what they steal. They don't distribute it to the population of their countries. Ask the poor in Britain. Ask the poor and working class in Britain and in the United States. They hoard it unto themselves. They distribute some of it to a comprador class in the country they've taken control of, as long as that comprador agrees to invest and recycle that which they are permitted in our stock markets, our casinos, our bordellos, our property markets, and increasingly our arms markets. But staying on Iran, what else can you say about the current standoff between the United States of America and the Islamic Republic of Iran, that it is a clear, transparent effort to bend Iran to America's will? And if it will not bend, it must be broken and replaced by a compliant regime, ironically led by the very man that led or came to power after the coup in 1953. His name's Pahlavi, but don't bother looking him up. You will never have to know how to spell his name. It is an attempt to say that Iran became too powerful, just like China under the Qings. It is an attempt to say we can't allow China to have the ability, Iran to have the ability to act in their own interest without deference to us, without kowtowing to us. We must change this, or as they call it now, regime change. Well, the Iranians have seen them off. There's no other conclusion from the fact that despite claiming he had won the war at least 47 times, he hasn't won the war. Despite claiming that the Straits of Hormuz are open, that shipping can go by, the Straits of Hormuz are not open. They're closed. And no ships are going by. I don't know the figure today, but yesterday, 4 ships passed through the Straits of Hormuz, as opposed to 74 that passed on that day 12 months before. There is an energy crisis, the mother of all energy crises, coming down the pipeline to you, and nobody's talking about it as a matter of deliberate state policy, transmitted through a client or state-controlled media to play down the economic and energy disaster that is on the way to us. But facts are chills that win a ding. The Brent crude price on paper this morning is $92. To actually buy concretely a barrel of oil will cost you closer to $120. And the gap between petrol and diesel, diesel being what makes the world go round, is so enormous. It's the biggest gap that there has been since 40 years or 45 years from before. We are in deep, deep trouble. And what's Trump doing? Well, what can he do? He can't win. He can't afford to lose. So he's settled for trying to limp to November in a no war, no peace situation, which he calls a siege. Now, of course, the American Navy can blockade some of the territory, nautical territory, at the end of the straits, but they cannot come in. They are at total exposure of being sunk if they come in. So when they say a blockade, they mean they'll situate enough warships at the mouth of the straits to make it difficult for people to get insurance, to be able to attempt to pass through, even if the Iranians have collected the toll and agreed that they may pass through. What if the Americans sink you? What if the Americans board you? What's your insurer going to say, do about that? So we're in it until at least November. I don't believe, and I never have, as you know if you watch these monologues regularly, that the United States is going to invade Iran, a country of 93 million people, and not the pushover it was on this day in 1953. I don't believe that the American system could withstand the shock of thousands of their people coming back in body bags, in coffins, covered in the stars and stripes. I don't believe they can do that. But they can maintain some kind of siege upon Iran as long as the rest of us are prepared to pay the economic price of that. And so far, we are, because we are led by idiots. And that's our fault, because we knew that they were idiots. We have been watching them being idiots for many years past, and yet have continued, either directly or indirectly, to allow them to continue in power. At which point, I have to turn to Andy Burnham. Andy Burnham is the Minister of Britain without anyone casting a single vote in his favour. And this morning, he declared that we are at war with Russia, the biggest nuclear weapons country on the earth, the possessor of the best nuclear weapons, the fastest nuclear weapons, the hypersonic ballistic leaders of the arms race in the whole world. We, little Britain. And trust me, we've never been more little Britain. We're at war with them. What do I mean? Well, the Times newspapers broke the story that the recent missile attacks that have murdered workers in warehouses, now getting into their hundreds, pensioners in their beds in high-rise flats, children on beaches, these weapons were supplied to Zelensky by Britain. Now, of course, Britain has been up to its neck in this whole NATO war against Russia, right from the very start, from before the start, long before the start. But today was the first time that the British Prime Minister confirmed and defended the fact that British missiles were murdering civilians in Russia, deep inside Russian territory, that it was a deliberate act, and that Britain defended and continued to stand over the missile decisions that had been made. Now, Andy Burnham doesn't know much about politics. He doesn't know much about foreign politics. He doesn't know much about war politics. That much I've always known. But nobody in the Foreign Office could stop him expressing his pride at what Britain has now done. And I'm just not at all sure, because I'm not there and haven't been for almost 1 year now. I don't know if the British people are aware at all of what that means. It means Britain has declared war on Russia, has formally entered the war against Russia. And legally and morally, Russia now has the right to land hypersonic nuclear missiles down the chimney in 10 Downing Street, in Manchester, in Glasgow, in Birmingham. Would only take 3 missiles, multi-headed missiles, with 4, 5, 6 warheads on each missile. And you wouldn't be waking up tomorrow. And nothing would wake up tomorrow. Everything in our green and pleasant land would be dead, would be dust, nuclear dust. 3 missiles, that's all. And we would no longer exist. Is that what you want, Mr. Burnham? More importantly, is that what you want, great British public? If it isn't, you better wake up and bloody well do something about it pretty damn quick. It's the mother of all talk shows, Professor Seyed Mohammad Marandi, coming up next. Stay tuned. You're pushing an open door with me on that. My contempt for the United Nations is bottomless. I doubt that Mamdani had the authority to conduct an arrest, given the diplomatic immunity enjoyed by heads of government at the United Nations itself. But you may be right. I didn't know about the New York Philharmonic story. I had no idea that my late friend, President Arafat, was treated in such a disgraceful way. I'll read up on it more after the show. And all I'm saying is, Mamdani is trying to win over the American people to what is a radically different set of perspectives, a radically different narrative to that which they've been force-fed by the Uni Party over half a century and more, since the Second World War, in fact. And he deserves some credit for that. He is a very good persuader. He's persuaded the majority of New York's Jewish community to support him rather than Netanyahu. So there's a loud clack, but it is a minority clack that is on his case.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Here's the poll this evening. Is the Iran ceasefire dead or in a coma? Well, it's actually a relatively divided outcome so far. 20,000 votes have been cast. You can vote on my Telegram channel, t.me/George Galloway, on my X, on the YouTube community poll, on the YouTube stream. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. And if you are one of the advance guard, on patreon.com/George Galloway. There's a ballot box there too. Is the Iran ceasefire dead or in a coma? If you want to call the show, it's toll free in the United States and Canada, +1 855 50 MOATS, MOATS, +1 855 50 MOATS, MOATS, or 855-50-66287. It's free of charge in Britain and Ireland, 0800 229 4411, and the worldwide number 0044 203 966 2625. Well, let's have a word from the Oracle. Professor Seyed Mohammad Marandi, Professor of English Literature and Orientalism at the University of Tehran. He's been with us from the start. Let's hope we're all still together at the end. Professor, thanks for joining us. I just realized that this was the very day that the British and the Americans, with a bit of help from one or two others in Europe, actually overthrew the Iranian government to make sure that they could continue to control Iran's petroleum resources. Not much different from 2026, really, 73 years later.
Well, good evening, George. It's always a great pleasure and a great honor being with you and with your audience. Yes, it is. It's the same. The world hasn't changed much, has it? The only difference is that people across the world are much more awake than they were before back then. What they did in 1953 was manipulate the public in Iran, turn people against each other, use money to empower rabble-rousers to do their bidding. And then, of course, they overthrew the national government, the elected government, and installed the Shah and began a 25-year police state where they were both ruthless to the Iranian people and they were relentless in their plundering of Iran's resources. Very much like what they do on the other side of the Persian Gulf still today. But today is very different, George. I mean, you've been to Iran, you know Iran quite well. The Iranian people are very different people. They're an extraordinary people, like the people of Yemen, like the resistance in Lebanon, and those who are with the resistance in Iraq. They're very politically aware, very determined, very resilient. And we saw that both during the 12-day war, but more importantly during the recent war. After Ayatollah Khamenei was martyred, George, we didn't have a leader. And we had the superpower and the Israeli regime, along with its regional proxies, taking a move to undermine the state, the country, not just the Islamic Republic, but to dismember the country. They were moving to get rid of the problem altogether. And yet the Iranian people were steadfast. The armed forces were steadfast. We didn't have a leader for the first week or two. And yet it was the people who held the country together. They were on the streets every night under missile fire, under the worst sort of terrorism possible. So the people of Iran today are infinitely different from the people of Iran in 1953. And that's what gives me optimism, because this very powerful ray of hope that we're seeing emerge in West Asia is ultimately going to bring about change. And people elsewhere are beginning to wake up. And we're seeing it. We've been seeing it for the past 5-6 months, how people outside, beyond Iran's borders, are seeing through decades of anti-Iranian propaganda, anti-resistance propaganda. We now see how people's views of Palestine have changed during the last almost 3 years now, thanks to the stupidity and the genocidal characteristics of the Zionist regime. You've been involved in the Palestinian cause much longer than I. I don't think you could ever have imagined that the world public opinion, and especially American public opinion, would have evolved in this way in your lifetime, or in my lifetime, or perhaps even in the lifetime of your children. May they all live long.
It's a fact. I never imagined it. Never imagined it even just a few short years ago, or maybe even months ago, that American politicians are losing their jobs because they have been on the take from the Israel lobby. They're being defeated over and over and over again in primary elections in the United States. I could never have predicted that, even months, never mind years ago. But I characterize the current situation now between Trump and the war party in the United States, which is growing smaller, I think, by the day, and you as being no war, no peace. I mean, I'm looking at that scene behind you of peace, I hope. And, you know, there were nights, Professor, when I was afraid that they were going to kill you on air as you spoke to me on the mother of all talk shows. And now I see you looking relaxed. I see that there's no actual war, but neither is there peace. They're going to try and starve you to death rather than bomb you to death. Have I got that right?
You're right, George. That's how they function. I recall that during the previous siege, after the 40-day war, when Trump failed, he began with unconditional surrender, and then ultimately he had to accept the Iranian 14-point plan as the framework for negotiations. But after that, he imposed a siege that lasted for more than 2 months. And I recall senators in the United States going on the Sunday morning talk shows saying how wonderful it is. People in Iran are hungry. They don't have food, gloating, taking such pleasure in the idea that people are hungry. That's the Epstein class, of course. And of course, it was nonsense. There was no hunger in Iran, and there's no hunger today in Iran, thank God. But that is objective. And the siege is to break the will of the Iranian people. It is to, and that's what the sanctions have been about for the last 40-some years. Just like in Cuba, they strangle women and children. They take them by the throat to force them to rise up and overthrow the government. And Western governments pretend, Western elites pretend that the elites linked to the state pretend that they are the supporters of human rights and human honor and human dignity. So the objective is to bring the Iranian people to the streets, ordinary people to their knees and then to the streets. But that's going to fail. It already failed last time round. Last time round, we saw over 2 months of siege warfare. And it was ultimately Trump who had to agree to the MOU. You recall that the gap between the American position and the Iranian position was significant. And then the Israeli regime struck Beirut, and Iran said, we're going to bomb the Israelis. And Trump said, we accept your demands, and the MOU was signed. So I doubt that the United States is going to get what it wishes. I have no doubt that it will fail, in fact. And I think that after the siege warfare, the only thing that will have changed is that the world will be a much more difficult place, thanks to the Zionists, thanks to Trump, thanks to Netanyahu. People across the world will have more difficulty purchasing food, more difficulty raising children, more difficulty continuing to go on with their ordinary lives, all because of Trump, all because of Netanyahu and their genocidal aspirations and their aspirations to create the greater Israel.
Well, of course, Iran could wait the siege out, and there are pressures on Trump, not least the election in November, but also economic pressures, the backlash against his insouciance about the rapidly rising price of petrol, or gasoline as they call it, is a considerable one. Iran could wait the siege out, or it could try to break out. And it's clear to me, reading, not between the lines, reading the open polemics and debates going on in Iran, even within the parliament, within the government, that there are at least two schools of thought on that. What can you tell us about the relative balance between the two schools?
I think Iran is determined to defeat the United States, come what may. And the choosing of the new chair of the Supreme National Security Council clearly indicates that the leader, Ayatollah Seyed Mohammad Marandi, is going to be more assertive. And Iran is going to take the initiative in the conflict with the United States. Iran's military doctrine is defensive, but when it comes to the aggressor, I think Iran is going to be on the offensive now. And we're already seeing the region changing. We see the Saudi regime and Yemen at war. The Saudis underestimated Yemen, just like the Americans underestimated Iran. And the resistance in Iraq is very much in place. And of course, Hezbollah is very much alive and effective. The Iranians have said, George, that in order for this to end, in order for the Strait of Hormuz to be open, the United States has to accept and carry out all of its obligations. Whether the MOU is dead or alive, Iran doesn't care. Trump has to carry out all those obligations. And Iran has been more specific about what the MOU actually means. We've discussed this together before. When Iran said in Article 1 that the war in Lebanon must end and Lebanese sovereignty must be respected and the Israeli regime ultimately must leave in the war for good, in that article it also says the same is true with all the other fronts. But now the Iranians have been very specific. That means Palestine. That means Yemen, and that means Iraq. So effectively what the Iranians are saying is that unless the Americans carry out all of their obligations, which includes ending the genocide in Gaza, we will not have any agreement, and we will not open the Strait of Hormuz. So that is good news for the people of Palestine. It shows the determination of the Iranians to stand up against this genocidal alliance, this Epstein coalition. But it's going to be tough, and it's going to take time. And of course, they're targeting the Iranian people, they're targeting the people of Yemen, they're targeting the entire resistance. But I I'm absolutely certain and confident that the axis of resistance will prevail.
I felt sometimes I pinch myself to see if I'm awake. When I heard Donald Trump threaten to bomb the shit out of little Oman, I actually wondered if my ears had deceived me. You say I know Iran, by the grace of God I do, but I know Oman even better. Oman is a pro-Western, peaceful oasis where the British have bases. And here you've got this brute threatening to bomb the shit out of a country that is merely trying to be as neutral as it can in the sea of treachery that surrounds the Islamic Republic of Iran. And it has so aroused the ire of Donald Trump that he can speak in this vulgar, vicious way. What did the Omanis do to deserve it, I ask you?
They did nothing to deserve it. In fact, Oman, while it has good relations with Iran historically, it has been as faithful to the United States as any other one of these countries in the region. It has never done anything to harm U.S. interests, harm the empire, and to harm the Israeli regime. In fact, none of the countries in the region have, except for the Islamic Republic of Iran, Yemen, and the resistance in West Asia. But Oman mediated between Iran and the United States because the United States wanted them to. Oman was helping the U.S. Navy until they no longer were capable of doing so because of the damage caused by the Iranians. So it just shows how the empire is in decline. I know that Trump is unique in many ways, and that he has removed the fat mask of this ugly empire, and he has removed the mask which the facade of human rights and human values and all the other nonsense that Western the Epstein class has been throwing at us for the last few decades. But the reality is that the United States, whether under Trump or under previous regimes, they've always been ruthless to friend and foe. They've always forced even their closest friends to do their bidding. But in the case of Trump, he does it in such an ugly way that the entire world sees it and is in shock. But I think that's another sign of a declining empire. Declining empire needs a leader that reflects that decline.
Well, another sign of a declining empire is the limping homeward of what we've called here the USS Stinkin' Lincoln. And some shafts of truth are shining through now. It's revealed today in the United States that the reason why there was no toilet paper, soap, or basic foodstuffs for the 5,000 sailors on board the Abraham Lincoln was that the base that they were to be supplied from had been completely destroyed by Iran, meaning, I'm presuming, Bahrain. Now, they never told us that the base had been destroyed. They never told us that they were unable to victual their flagship vessel because Iran had destroyed their ability to do so. And if you and I had claimed that Iran had destroyed it, we would have been accused of a conspiracy theory. We would have been called liars. And now it's Hegseth that was the liar, not just to us, but to the American people themselves.
Yes, and if I'm not mistaken, Hegseth was accompanying Trump when he fled the airplane and left all the journalists behind and his staff behind. I think Hegseth was also with him when they were more than willing to sacrifice all of their companions and all of the journalists. I mean, the whole story was fake.
Maybe he was in
and
the
as
drinks.
soon as
he
I heard
was in the
story,
drinks compartment. Trump was in amongst the food and Hegseth amongst the drinks.
Yeah, that sounds how it should be. But when I first heard of this story, I immediately said to myself, "This is the Israelis. The Israeli regime is behind this. This is their intelligence." And then that's exactly what it turned out to be. And so Trump not only ignores his own intelligence agencies, he's not only obedient to the intelligence agency of a foreign regime and their lobby at home, but he is such a coward, even though the story was fake and there was no conspiracy. He is such a coward that he left all of his own people and all the journalists as decoys to get killed so that he could survive. Instead of saying, we won't take this flight, we will take extra precautions, we'll have, George, when you recall, when we went to Islamabad for the negotiations after the 40-day war, on our way there, when we arrived, the Washington Post put out an opinion piece, and the Washington Post is close to the CIA, saying that the Iranian negotiators should be assassinated. And when the talks collapsed in Islamabad, we knew that the plane that we were going to take back was possibly going to be shot down by the American regime or the Israeli regime or both. Every single person from the delegation boarded the plane, including the head of the delegation, Dr. Ghalibaf. And he actually, on the way back, he came to the back of the plane and shook hands with everyone and greeted everyone and thanked everyone. There were young men and women journalists there who had accompanied the delegation, and who just every single one, as far as I know, came back on the same flight. But the head of the delegation, despite the threats, stayed with the plane, and everyone else accompanied him. Yet the President of the United States let everyone fly in the plane so that this so-called terrorist, this non-existent terrorist, could shoot them down and kill a couple of hundred people. And then he and Hegseth, who was busy in the drinks, having the drinks, and he having his McDonald's hamburgers, could survive for another day.
Amazing. Extraordinary. Well, Professor, thank you as always for helping us through the latest twists and turns. The straits are not open. The economic consequences of that are evident and will increasingly be evident. But Iran now stands so much taller than it did in 1953. Mossadegh was a pushover in the end. The Islamic Republic of Iran ain't no pushover at all. Thank you, sir, for joining us. It's been a pleasure, as always. Professor Marandi, Professor of English Literature and Orientalism at the University of Tehran. Let me take a quick break, then your calls coming next. One from Los Angeles on Tucker Carlson. Can't wait to hear it. Stay tuned.
Many people today struggle with the common mainstream media consumer. These types of people are mindless zombies. Instead of living authentically, they feed off masking their true thoughts and feelings, doing nothing and criticizing those who actually do their research. These type of media consumer can be highly manipulative, so here are some golden standard clapbacks when they start with their propaganda. When they say you are too much for them, show them a mirror and tell them to look for less. Draw a diagram of where your business is and their business is, to visually show them they are in the wrong area. When they say, please watch this clip from this reputable BBC journalist, remind them that there are no longer any reputable BBC journalists, and to instead watch the mother of all talk shows for some real journalism. The next time you encounter a brainwashed zombie, hold your head high and know their obsession to eat your brain is masking their jealousy of your confidence, your freedom in self-expression, and most importantly, your authenticity. Keep listening to learn more on the mother of all talk shows.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
My grandson, Sean Stewart, he says, just in, Harvard to pay $53 million in a lawsuit over selling donated corpses on the black market. What stage of capitalism does that represent? I don't know. Let's hear from Barrento in LA on Tucker Carlson. I'm all ears, Barrento. What do you want to say?
Hey, George. Yeah, I'm not gonna. There was a caller a couple, I think a day or two ago, that was calling Tucker racist and stuff, and I'm not gonna do that because I think it's kind of self-centered. But I have worked in the field of racial equity before, and there is something, not to what they were saying, but there is a sentiment, especially amongst people who have been working in, elders in that field who've really like coalition built. And also, I want to preface with, I actually agree with you that we're really up against it, and now is really not the time to do some extra sectarianism in the face of essentially the apocalyptic capitalism. But I just wanted to share this and see how this is landing for you, because I'm really curious about how you feel about this. We're now watching like gambling and addictions like tear family ties and essentially just consume culture to the point of where it's just this degradation of bonds between people and structure, and it's a lot more widespread now, but these are the things that have been happening on reservations and in black communities, like liquor stores and casinos and these kinds of things. And there is, whenever I am in discussion about these things, I can't help but really hear that of like, this has been something, this has been going on for a long time. And I think that this is where some of the suspicion is coming from, because the lack of acknowledgement, not in like I don't want to make it sound like I'm looking for a purity test, or I want Tucker to do blank, therefore he is good. I think it's just more so like, there's only a few ways, there's only a few tricks that, the the ruling class actually has of just destroying the bonds of society, and it's just now reaching the masses now. It's running out of people to subjugate, and so now it's really reaching a lot of the white population. And so it's just the sudden realization is leading to a concern of like, how are we not going to repeat the exact same thing without at least acknowledging like, okay, this is a system that runs on the essence of people, and now it's essentially squeezing everyone at this point. And so, I don't know if this is making sense, but I'm more so curious about how this is landing for you, not necessarily.
No, it is making sense. It is making sense, and powerfully expressed. Let me begin with the Tucker point first. Let me acknowledge that this is an entirely legitimate question. And of course, as each of us approach everything through the portals of our own experience, I'm not black, and I'm not an American black. And if I was an American black, although I make every conceivable effort to empathize, I'm not and never will be a black American. And things look different if you are a black American, and they sounded different when Tucker was making racially charged remarks in his past before he began what is turning out to be an epic journey, a Marco Polo of a journey. If you had said to me 12, 24 months ago, Tucker Carlson would end up in the following political positions, I'd have said, come off it. But of course, when he was a Fox News pundit, he told me on air when he interviewed me on his show that at the time of the Iraq War, he hated me. In fact, he went further and said, I was one of the people he hated more than anyone else in the world, because I was the most prominent voice against the Iraq War. And now he's telling Sky News live that I should be the Prime Minister of Britain. And I'm telling you live that he should be the President of the United States, although I'll caveat that in just a minute. So this is an epic Marco Polo of a journey, and it has to be acknowledged that journeys begin somewhere, and they begin in a very different place from where they end. That much is obvious. And if Tucker has to go the extra mile, work that bit extra hard to persuade people he has particularly offended, then he needs to hear that. I haven't spoken to him since that conversation with the young woman, I think in Boston, if I recall correctly. I haven't spoken to him since then, but I have sent the clip, because he needs to know that he has work still to do to persuade people. But as a practicing and practical and pragmatic political actor myself, I've come to the conclusion that the lad, the deputy leader of the Green Party, I won't attempt his name because I've partially forgotten it, Butch, I recall, but the second name I no longer... Butch Ware. My wife is from the wings reminding me. Butch Ware. My apologies, Butch. No doubt a worthy fella, but my practical political nose tells me he has zero chance of winning the presidency of the United States, but Tucker Carlson has far more than zero of a chance. And Tucker Carlson's politics, while different from Butch, as a matter of fact, Butch stands for some things that I myself don't agree with, but of course Butch would be politically closer to the audience of the mother of all talk shows than Tucker Carlson. But on the most important things, Tucker Carlson's conclusions are exactly the same as ours. So who are you going to back? The guy with zero chance of winning, or the guy with a good chance of winning, who is against these wars, who can save the world from nuclear catastrophe? Well, to me, that is a no-brainer of a question, literally a no-brainer. And I'm merely appealing to everyone to come with me on this, unless you're going to persuade me either that Tucker has no chance or Tucker is going to renege on all these positions, even though the Israelis are trying to kill him, the Ukrainians are trying to kill him. The American deep state is probably trying to kill him. So far has he moved. Strategic damage to their positions has he dealt. But unless you're going to persuade me that Tucker is not the man I think he is, that Tucker does not have the chance to win the presidency that I think he does, then you're not going to persuade me that supporting someone else with whom one might agree 100% and with no baggage, although who that St. Francis of Assisi might be, I don't know. I don't know anybody that I agree with 100%. I don't know anybody that has no baggage. But maybe you do. Maybe other people do. I mean, it's not so long ago. It's really not so long ago that people were on here telling me that I was wrong to support Dr. Jill Stein of the Green Party. I should have supported Cornel West. Hello, Cornel West. You remember when he was the best thing since sliced bread? At least that's what callers were telling me. They were upbraiding me for not supporting Cornel West, whatever happened to him. Barrento, on the Native American point, I think I've said before, you may have heard me, my mother told a journalist once that she knew that I was going to be an unusual boy because as a boy, I was always on the side of what we called then the Red Indians. I was always against the white settlers. I cheered when Custer was killed. I was with Sitting Bull at the Little Bighorn, with Geronimo, and with 100 unnamed American, indigenous American champions resisting the manifest destiny of white settlers arriving in large part from my own country. So I feel and have felt most keenly all of my life and began to sharpen that understanding on reading Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee, which I read when I was at school, probably in 1969 or 70. And it profoundly affected me, as did a number of movies at that time, before and since. Little Big Man, Soldier Blue, and Dances with Wolves much later. I feel the pain of the indigenous American population and their fate at the hands of the brute, the European brute. I hate the European brute. There are many fine people in the continent of Europe, many fine people in my own country of Britain. But as I was explaining to one of my kids the other day, we have to take some share of the responsibility for the acts, unspeakable, brute acts of people who looked like us, who had names like ours, and who hailed from the same country that we do. Thanks, Barrento. Got to take a break. It's going to be a brilliant second half of the show. We'll probably switch the function now of the focus, rather, of the second half of the show to the Ukrainian front, to the NATO-Russia war. 20,500 people have voted. Still divided. Have your say. Is the Iran ceasefire dead or in a coma? Let me tell you, before I take this break, that the Moats team has launched a GoFundMe page for our Moats legend Erobos in New York. let's catch up on how much money has so far been pledged to his cause. It is now, oh my goodness, 2,070 English pounds, so you can do the conversion yourselves. We are getting closer to at least helping Erebos back onto his feet. Please do give to that GoFundMe. Now, you can do it through simple going to the GoFundMe page. And let me take that promised break. It's the one and only Chay Bowes coming up next. Stay tuned.
The 1897 edition of War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. Read by George Galloway. Available only on Patreon.
The cylinder was artificial, hollow, with an end that screwed out. Something within the cylinder was unscrewing the top. Good heavens, said Ogilvy. There's a man in it, men in it, half roasted to death, trying to escape. At once, with a quick mental leap, he linked the thing with the flash on Mars. The thought of the confined creature was so dreadful to him that he forgot the heat and went forward to the cylinder to help turn. But luckily, the dull radiation arrested him before he could burn his hands on the still glowing metal.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
If it wasn't for the poor track record of those who predicted it would all be over by Christmas, I would now be predicting that the NATO war against Russia will at least have run into the buffers by Christmas, notwithstanding the joining of the great war leader Andy Burnham to the Kiev cause. I'll tell you why. It seems to me that the Ukrainian regime is beginning to fall apart at the seams. The foreign minister, relatively popular, was sacked by Zelensky and has now today publicly demanded new elections, presidential elections included, in the Ukraine. Top officials of the Zelensky office were raided today by the so-called anti-corruption unit, which is really the American government in disguise, getting closer and closer to Zelensky, and thereby indicating that Trump really doesn't think Zelensky has many cards. And the front, the military front, notwithstanding Ukraine's ability to kill pensioners and beachgoers, is so disastrous now for the Ukrainian armed forces that the war may be galloping to a conclusion rather more quickly than any of your mass media will let you believe. Chay Bowes is the best informed man in Moscow. He's the best informed Westerner on all these matters that I know, and that's why he's always the first man I reach to at critical moments in this conflict. Chay Bowes joins me now. Chay, thanks for joining us again. Let's start with what's happening in the Ukraine itself. I'm right, amn't I? It is beginning to rattle down.
Well, George, you gave a very good synopsis there in your introduction. I think I really, for the first time in a long time, I think most observers now on both sides of the divide, either those paid by the NATO countries or paid by the British or paid by the French or whoever, I find it very difficult to see how this projected win. We were told for a number of months, remarkably, almost comedically, that Ukraine was winning, which was kind of remarkable. Everyone was kind of looking around at themselves going, how? What is this about? And that seems to have been the last death throw attempt by the client media in the West to convince sort of these dilapidated and exhausted taxpayers in Europe and in the United States of America that they are backing a winning horse. But this is obviously a nag heading to the knacker's yard. There's no element or no objective view that could possibly suggest that this winter coming will be anything but the final winter for Ukraine at war. And I mean, as you know, we've talked on this subject for years, literally. And I'm a very, let's say, I'd like to think at least that I'm a quite careful analyst when it comes to this stuff. I don't like to make claims, but the walls are closing in at every point for Zelensky now. Internally, politically, I should say at the front, the idea of any sort of Ukrainian victory is now as distant as the idea that Vladimir Zelensky could be elected if an election does take place. And as you very rightly point out, it's voices from very close to him, from within his most sort of privileged bastion, this inner circle, from almost inside the Führer bunker at the last moment as the Soviets close in onto the Tiergarten. This is the man's most trusted confidants, this guy Fyodorov, this defense minister who was fired, who was with Zelensky, interestingly, for 6 years since his election in 2019 and recently put in charge of the Ministry of Defense. He's the man calling now openly, which is unthinkable for elections in Ukraine. Despite the fact the war is going on, he said that Ukraine has to return to democracy. Really remarkable revelations.
It is, and of course it can't happen. And when people demand things that can't happen, we call them transitional demands. In other words, they are demands that could only be realized if there was a transition from one form of power to a wholly different one. And that is, of course, what he is now demanding, because, as you rightly inferred, Zelensky can't possibly run for election because he'd come last. He'd come fourth rather than first. His goons, nobody does a better job than you at highlighting the brutality of these thugs that he's got going around dragging old men out of their seats in taxis, bludgeoning disabled people, dragging them off to the front. People who've already been and were wounded and had every right to sit it out are then drafted again. The situation is catastrophic for Zelensky personally. And I think that Trump is sending him a message with the NBU activity today, raiding members of his own office, Zelensky's own office. That's how it looks to me. You're closer to things than me. What do you think?
Well, look, regarding two issues you bring up, these protests, which we're told are spontaneous. We spoke about this the last time we spoke, about a month ago. You asked me about these, what looked like spontaneous protests. And nothing moves on the streets of this police state, this dictatorship, without the okay of Zelensky, of the cabal, or of his masters. Now, there have been spontaneous, if you like, protests in support of this man, Fyodorov, this young 35-year-old Minister of Defense who was sacked by Zelensky. Zelensky has started to sack and destroy the prospects of anybody close to him he thinks that might threaten him in a coming election or a forced election. None of those protests can happen, as you know and as you rightly point out, without the okay of the United States of America. Less so London, who are, again, supplicant and basically will have to follow the line of Donald Trump. And it's very, very clear now that Trump has indeed seemingly run out of patience with Mr. Zelensky. He's mired in this war of choice in Hormuz, And as a result of that war of choice, Mr. Zelensky has absolutely no way to stop the seemingly endless barrage of Russian ballistic missiles, which are picking apart the remnants of his military-industrial complex as we speak. Odessa has been strangled, the last real access to the sea. It's all coming in very fast on Mr. Zelensky, and winter is coming as well. So the point you made about Mr. Trump basically standing back from this and giving license to Fyodorov and his army of young students who are miraculously very interested in Ukrainian politics all of a sudden. Thousands of students carrying the same type of placard, carrying signs in English saying, in Fyodorov, we trust. English signs. It seems to me very clear, as someone who's been on the ground where colour revolutions have been attempted before and seen this MO many times, Georgia, Serbia, I've seen it with my own eyes. This, to me, bears all the hallmarks of a constructed move against Zelensky, and that is licensed from the Oval Office, make no mistake, and I'm absolutely sure of that. So it seems that Zelensky will probably get more and more brutal, more and more aggressive. He's appointed another head of the army, of course, as we know, a man who's accused of war crimes by the Russians, who's actually been convicted of war crimes in Lugansk and Donetsk. After firing Syrskyi, who he fired the defense chief, Fyodorov, because he said that he couldn't get along with Syrskyi. And then days after he fired Fyodorov, he fired Syrskyi also. So it's a remarkable catalogue. And then we move into the president's office, where, as you say today, NABU, this American-backed, this CIA-backed anti-corruption agency, which seems to operate with absolute impunity in Kiev. It's the only thing that can do. It's remarkable, isn't it, George? Complete coincidence. They have today arrested the deputy boss of Zelensky's office, who has been recorded saying there's a couple of 100 million hryvnia that need to be washed by the boss. Now, the boss can only be two people. It can either be Kirill Budanov, the ex-Secret Service chief, or Mr. Zelensky itself. So the chess pieces are being moved closer and closer to Zelensky, it seems to me. The hand on the pieces is certainly coming from Washington, as far as I can see as well. If you add up all the sort of elements of this, Washington's decreasing, patience with their NATO partners, the increasingly catastrophic and comedic behavior of the Americans in the Gulf when it comes to Iran. You've got Iran actually offering ceasefire terms essentially to Donald Trump because of this war he's fighting to open a stretch of water which was closed before he engaged in this absolutely ludicrous war. It's gone from bad to worse, it seems, in the background to Mr. Zelensky, his backers. And on the ground, the Russians are incrementally moving forward, and they've critically taken the gloves off in the Black Sea and are now strangling Ukrainian ports, hitting their merchant navy, which the Ukrainians, it has to be said, they were the architects. They built a scaffold for this for themselves. They cut a rod for their own back because they began to strike Russian grain ships on the seas of Azov and on the Black Sea, and now they're reaping the rewards for that. The winter coming for Ukraine will be pivotal. I don't see how Zelensky could retain power in Ukraine for the coming winter. I think it's going to become a catastrophic failure for his regime and potentially for his backers too, George.
But it's an ill wind that blows nobody any good, and Zelensky may have lost Donald Trump, but he's gained somebody called Andy Burnham. The great war leader Andy Burnham has stood over the decision made to use and admit to using British missiles, plus their instruction manuals, maybe even their instructors, to fire weapons into a nuclear superpower's territory and kill children, pensioners, workers in that country. Now, I'm not sure, I know you're an Irish citizen, so soon will I be, but spare a thought for the British people, Gov. Do they even know that they've got a leader who is actually now officially taking them to war with the most powerful nuclear weapons power in the world.
Yeah, it's quite remarkable, isn't it? And what I found was interesting was when Burnham was very sort of spontaneously, George, interviewed by Sky News. He hadn't been given the questions, of course, as they never are in the British media. Okay, so Mr. Burnham has asked, what he thinks about Russian claims that these British drones, which there's been a quantity of them, they are quite dangerous. They have inflicted some damage. But remember, the British media, Sky News, liked to believe that they were announcing this, that British munitions had been used against Russia. The Russians were well aware. I've been informed that the Russians knew the day they were fired, after shooting the majority of them down, exactly what the British had sent, where they were launched from, and who used them. So the Russians knew the British were complicit in this, as they were sending Challenger tanks, which were destroyed and withdrawn from the front line. They were going to be a game changer, along with the Leopards and the Abrams, as you recall. So rather than an operational impact that these things have, this is a sort of a pseudo-religious impact. This is Mr. Burnham's offering at the collapsing temple of Ukraine. He has been ushered in there by his masters in the British security state. I'm absolutely sure of it, because he seemed to have been given what read to me like a sort of a prayer book for Ukraine, almost akin to that of Mr. Starmer's 1,000-year Reich with Ukraine, where he said, no matter what happens in Ukraine, we will stand with them for 100 years or 1,000 years or 1,000 millennia, whatever it may be. Mr. Burnham, you have to remember, has been placed in power by a gaggle of MPs. He wasn't elected by the British people, and you as a parliamentarian know that. You also see this erosion and the catastrophic picking apart of the cradle of parliamentary democracy in the UK. You become a dissident in your own country because of your beliefs and views. You've seen, don't expect anything than this increasing influence of the security state in the UK. And they have basically written this, in my view, this speech for Mr. Burnham to say, we will stand with Ukraine. There is no discussion about it. There is no space for discussion or disagreement. Despite the fact that he paints himself as an avid socialist, he's a pro-war character, Mr. Burnham. As you know, he voted for the Iraq war. He voted several times for it. And more importantly, regarding something that you're very interested in and have spoken up on, he several times serially voted against inquiries into the Iraq war, its genesis, the Steele dossier, the manufactured rationale for the massacre and killing and destruction of a civilization and 1 million innocent souls that were lost along with it. Mr. Burnham voted against the inquiry for the war. Finally, he was forced by reality to vote for the Chilcot inquiry and its kind of muted outcome. But this is not a man who's anti-war. He's a sort of a champagne socialist, as you well know. He's Tony Blair 3.0, and anyone's expecting anything different on Ukraine, this deep state project to destabilize Russia through Ukraine from Mr. Burnham, was sorely misinformed or simply stupid.
Well, I'm literally praying that the Russians don't do what they are now legally and morally fully entitled to do, which is to declare and consider that the British are now in the war. Because if your Prime Minister is acknowledging that you not only did this, but you stand by it, he's not announcing an inquiry into it or anything. He's standing by it. And as you say, asserting that it will continue. I felt he was talking to me, by the way. I don't want to sound paranoid. But when he said there's no discussion about this, he was saying we may titularly be a democracy, but you better not oppose our policy on the Ukraine. And Russia, by all legal tenets, would be entitled to say, well, Andy Burnham just declared war on us. What are we going to do about it? I'm praying they don't do what they could do.
Yeah, again, I don't think it's in any way likely that the Russian state would engage in any sort of military action against civilian targets in the United Kingdom. I think that's probably more sort of Telegraph, Sun newspaper stuff, because that feeds this idea that the Russians in some way have some chagrin or some sort of animus against the ordinary British people. The Russians are very intelligent, as you understand, politically. They understand how unpopular political leaders are in the UK. They understand the fractious nature of British society now. And I feel personally, being somewhat close to both elements, that the Russians don't have to do much now when it comes to the United Kingdom, the United States, or Europe, other than stand back, much like the Soviets did when they were asked, are you going to invade Europe and install democracy in Western Europe? They said, Western Europe is in the process of destroying itself. It doesn't need any assistance from the Kremlin. And that's very, very true. We see that in France and Germany, destroying their economies, and this utter failure and this lack of statesmanship to actually assert any kind of form of sovereignty for their own countries, for the welfare of their own citizens. The UK is no different. So regarding the Russians deciding they're going to strike Porton Down or Salisbury Plain or somewhere like that, the British don't pose any sort of meaningful military threat. The British Army is the smallest in its long, illustrious history. The Navy is a laugh. It's laughably dilapidated, the British Navy. It built two very expensive aircraft carriers, only one of which is allowed to go to sea because they know it'll break down and they'll have to take, the starting motor after the other one, George. It's like Carry On up the English Channel. It's remarkable stuff. So in that vacuum of reality, the British security state and the British Etonian elite who run it need to continue to propel this idea that the Russians could attack us. It's almost akin to the idea that it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, that they would secretly hope that the Russians would act aggressively and Mr. Lavrov would do other than say, look, technically you're in this war now. One thing that could happen, and I think is about as bad as it would get for the British, would be potentially sort of military assets at sea being delivered to Ukraine or attempted to deliver, because it could be destroyed. It could happen. I don't think it's likely, but I think that would be the first thing that would happen, that Russia on the high seas would assert its right to prevent material weapons of war being delivered to a country that is killing its civilians. I mean, in my view, that seems like a quite rational first step. That might cool the boots of the British. But then again, they like to sort of talk about Article 5, this a la carte, we're all at war with Russia if Russia decides to finally bite back after being poked so hard by us, which is, of course, a complete paper tiger. If you read what Article 5 says, it says every country in NATO needs to do something. Now, that could be sending a shipload of toilet paper to the German army based in Latvia, or it could be joining war with Russia. But Turkey isn't going to go to war with Russia. Greece isn't going to go to war with Russia if Russia decides to sink a British freighter carrying drones or attempting to carry them to Odessa. It's certainly not going to happen. There's going to be a lot of collective outrage, but that's about where it's going to begin and going to end, George.
Finally, and I'm grateful for your time as always, Jay, there's elections coming up for the Duma in Russia. Are you following those at all? Who are the runners and riders? You expecting any change?
Yeah, well, of course, the elections are coming, and it's something very much animates people in Russia. The elections, of course. There's a couple of sort of new parties there. The New People Party is an interesting one. It's kind of a nationalist liberal party in many ways. I actually met the leader of it at the last elections. Very interesting man. We've had the controversy over Yabloko, this Apple party, which the Guardian and the Independent have been pronouncing have been banned from the election. They got banned from the election for taking foreign money. And when you take foreign money in an election in Russia, a country that has been proclaimed that needs to be pulled apart by the foreign backers who are trying to inject money into a campaign against the United Russia Party, which is Vladimir Putin's party, they take this stuff very seriously here. They take the impact of these NGOs who have a stated aim to decapitate Russia and balkanize it, George. I mean, so this is a serious business. They've been banned from the election. That's been the big news in the Western media, despite the fact that the United States of America would do exactly the same, and so would the British. You're not even allowed watch a clip from RT in Germany. You can go to prison. You're not allowed travel to Russia, as you know well, without being arrested as a terrorist. But if a party is banned from participating in an election, a very minor party, by the way, they never had more than 5 or 6% of the vote, much like Mr. Navalny, who likewise wasn't in any position to take power. It's a remarkable demonstration of this hypocrisy in the West that they focus on the Yabloko party, but the United Russia party will win the election. I actually saw some polls today from Levada, which are an independent pollster here in Moscow, saying that they're going to win. They'll get about 45% of the vote, and Mr. Putin will be re-elected. I mean, that's inevitable. His popularity in Russia, as you know, talking to taxi drivers, waitresses, doctors, anybody you have come across in Russia, I'm sure, has reinforced his popularity. And he will be re-elected. And he's a very, very popular leader here. His popularity, probably personally, is at about 72% now, which is a bit down because after a relatively long war, all leaders' popularity waned somewhat. But it's what Western leader wouldn't give a right arm, George, for a popularity of 72%. When you look at the remarkably poor popularity of people like Merz, whose economy is collapsing around him like some errant Roman emperor, it's remarkable stuff, George.
The Oracle, Chay Bowes, thanks for joining us again on the Mother of All Talk Shows. Fascinating stuff. Now, quick break, then it's your calls, right up to Gayatri, I hope, though I haven't yet made telephonic contact with her camera. Stay tuned. He's a schoolyard bully, Piers Morgan. And he does have a big show, but then he has a big and plush and very well appointed studio. And he has a big and very well paid staff. He has a very big budget. He's an extremely wealthy man. And the combination of all of that does give you a certain head start. We, on the other hand, are a mom and pop business. There's just me and Gayatri. And the people who told me the phones are melting are my own grandchildren who are answering the phones for nothing. This is an unpaid gig I'm doing and do twice a week. Nobody pays me one brass farthing to make this show, to present this show. I'm not sure that Piers Morgan would tell you how much he makes.
You are listening to the Mother of All Talk Shows with George Galloway.
I would say about 3/4 of the people voting on the poll think that the Iran ceasefire, the MOU, and all the paraphernalia is dead rather than in a coma. I'm not so sure myself, but yeah, anyway, you've got 10 minutes left to get your vote in. Is the Iran ceasefire dead or in a coma? You can vote on my Telegram channel, t.me/George Galloway, on my X, on the YouTube community poll, on the YouTube stream, or on patreon.com. Let's take a call from my old stamping ground of Glasgow, where Scott wants to talk about the axis of evil. Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, hello, George. I want the definitive answer on this. Why has that axis of evil, Britain, Israel, the USA, bombed, invaded, colonised, overthrew most of the world overtly, covertly, but London, Glasgow, New York never gets bombed in retaliation, or rarely gets bombed in retaliation? Scott Ritter said last week, if Iran kidnaps the US president, Iran would get nuked. But this doesn't happen in return. Look, don't get me wrong. I'm not calling for this. I live in Glasgow, family in London, no people in New York. But hey, fair's fair, and it would be legal too.
Well, of course, there's an asymmetry involved. The United States has thousands of nuclear weapons and could existentially eliminate any and all. But it would be eliminated itself in return. And this used to keep the peace. They called it MAD, mutually assured destruction. And for a long time, nobody would use nuclear weapons because they knew that even by a dead man's switch, your own country would be destroyed by incoming nuclear weapons. We've now reached a stage where I'm reliably informed by people who are in the know that Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth are openly discussing the efficacy or otherwise of a nuclear attack on Iran, because they know that Iran has no nuclear weapon. It's ironic. This is not even in the discussion anymore. When this all started, it was about stopping Iran from getting a nuclear bomb. Now, nobody mentions the nuclear question. It's all about the Straits of Hormuz being open, which were open before the war began. How bizarre is that? And because they know Iran doesn't have a nuclear weapon, they are discussing openly attacking Iran with a nuclear weapon. Compare and contrast Trump's attitude to Kim Jong-un of North Korea. He used to disparage him, called him the little rocket man and all that. He used to make jokes about his height and his weight and things like that. He's not laughing now. When Kim Jong-un made clear that these war games, which begin tomorrow, consisting of the United States and South Korea, were a potential existential threat to North Korea, with all that entailed, Trump cancelled them. He halved the length of them and more than halved the US participation in them, without even telling the South Koreans that he was going to do so. They learned about it in the media, that the ally, which all these decades they thought they could rely on, was abandoning them. And then Trump embarks on a panegyric to North Korea and to Kim Jong-un, his good friend, how Kim likes him and he likes Kim. I mean, it was almost a bromance moment from Trump's side, unrequited, I am perfectly sure. Trump may well travel to China, to Shenzhen, where we are often to be found, in September, just to see the North Korean leader, Kim Jong-un. Why? Because North Korea does have nuclear weapons. What's the moral of that story? I mean, you don't need to be Einstein to discern the moral of that story. If you've got nuclear weapons, Trump has to respect you. If you don't have nuclear weapons, Trump can openly threaten to attack you with nuclear weapons. That's the world we're living in now, Scott. Now, a big word of recognition for tonight's top Moat supporters: Ahmed Khalaf, Don Stewart, Josephine, Lee Armstrong, and James Glass. A big thanks to each and every one of you for backing the program through moats.tv. Your support helps to keep Moats independent, direct, and on air. If you want to support us, go to moats.tv and click the Donate Now button anywhere on the site. Give whatever you can in any currency you like. You can make it a one-off donation, or you can make it recurring support, which keeps us going week after week. Let's go to Florida, where there were some exciting election races yesterday, to hear from Thomas on the ACP in Florida. Thomas, welcome. Go ahead.
Hello, George. Wow, what an honor. It's a great honor to talk to you. Thank you for taking my call.
Thank you. Welcome.
My son and I, and a lot of our people in our party are big fans, of course. You know that. And my comrades, Jackson Hinkle and Haz Al-Din, who are friends of yours. We have friends in common, of course.
They are.
I just want to give you an update. The party is growing. We're signing up new people every day. It's really great. We're doing really well. We're doing lots of community outreach, a lot of education. And the people we have here are really impressive. They're from all walks of life, all races, genders, ages, family people, single people. And, we're making a lot of headway. And I just want to urge anyone, if you consider yourself a pro-Palestinian freedom, if you consider yourself an anti-imperialist, if you just want to see the end to all these wars, the perpetual, endless wars, if you consider yourself in any of those camps, you have to join an organization. Any organization, whether it be a union or a church community organization, or I hope you join the ACP. I believe in our party. And you can join our party at acp.us to sign up. And we're trying our best. We're doing our best down here.
That's good. That's a very snappy email address, acp.us. A good party political advertisement, free of charge, on Thomas in Florida. Some comments on YouTube. You can scan the QR code to leave comments. And, of course, if you keep them clean, I'll try and read them out. Bjorn Ringdahl, 988, sends $5. Thank you, Bjorn. Says, looking great in the Chinese outfit, George. Thanks, Bjorn. And Alison Kiro, 3486, says, George, is it true that Britain is giving Venezuelan gold to the USA? It is unbelievable. Here was I campaigning for the Bank of England to release to Venezuela the gold that they had snaffled, stolen. Although I do make the caveat always, why would anyone in their right mind give the Bank of England their sovereign wealth, their sovereign gold? Anyway, I finally got my way. The Bank of England are releasing Venezuela's gold. Only they're not releasing it to Venezuela, they're releasing it to Donald Trump. Listen, unless you're a complete idiot, don't keep your money in the Bank of England. Jolly Lollipop sends $5. Thank you. Steal a little and they throw you in jail. Steal a lot and they make you a king. Daniel Morgan, 1777, says ceasefire is Zio for rearm. And Jeffrey R86 says, is Mitch McConnell dead or in a coma? Well, to paraphrase the late and great Dorothy Parker, how could one tell if he was dead, in a coma, or just normal? On line one is Paul in Liverpool on war in the Middle East. Go ahead, Paul.
Thanks, George. Once again, great programme. Excellent information being passed out, which you don't get from the mainstream media. I just want to touch on the fact that what people have missed, in 2015, an ex-CIA man called Claridge, he states that Saudi Arabia have got several bombs. So it's not just possibly Israel, it's the Saudis, and that area of the earth is proliferation with these weapons of mass destruction. Now, Iran's proved that Western technology is not working. You've got Iran, their application with ballistic missiles, their drones is winning. And the Americans, I like the Americans, they're great people, but they will not accept the fact that Iran's won. I'd also like to just touch briefly on Ukraine and the economic situation, if I may, George. If you look at Ukraine, Russia is in its legal right to it back. Now, people like Bernard, I don't know if it's the military, but someone's telling Bernard that the UK is some sort of mighty creature. We are not. We are a screaming mouse. We haven't got the weapons. We haven't got the ability to whip back. So I believe Russia has the legal right to whip back, because our drones made in the UK are killing Russians, and that's not acceptable. I said that last time to you. So these people in London, in these secret bunkers, they think that they're going to survive a nuclear attack. They will not survive. It's madness. Also, the third point, George, I'd like to bring up the economic
They won't survive, Paul, and it wouldn't be worth surviving. I mean, what would you do when you eventually, after a couple of years, crawled out of your nuclear bunker to discover everybody and everything around you is dead, and that the nuclear winter has rendered life unlivable in the country that you helped to destroy? It is extraordinary that you and I are having this conversation, that the unthinkable has now become more likely than not. When I was your age, when I was an activist in my teens, my 20s, we were terrified of nuclear war because we knew it was the end, but we kind of had some reason to think and hope that it wouldn't happen, that nobody at the top in the nuclear armed powers could possibly be so stupid and suicidal as to do it. But we're no longer in that world. Now, I'm having to rediscover the world of weapons, Paul. I did a deep dive into drones this week with Larry C. Johnson. And we're going to do a second one. Well, we were going to do a second one on hypersonic missiles, but I think we'll have to do a second one on drones because it's gone so well, but so many questions have been asked. I think I'll need to ask Larry to come back for a second go on the issue of drones before we get to the hypersonic missiles. But, you know, the last time I fired a gun in anger, or not even in anger, in training, was an SLR and a mortar in the 1960s. So there's a lot of development since then. So we are unfortunately now in a world where we're having to relearn what weapons do and what they can do, and how catastrophic that is. Now, on the issue of nuclear weapons, Paul, I hate nuclear weapons. I was arrested and thrown in prison in Greenock, outside the British nuclear weapons base. I was picked up off the road by 4 of Strathclyde's finest police officers, thrown in the back of a van, taken to jail. So there I am. Yeah. I gave the only interview ever given to the BBC upside down, and I'm quite proud of those pictures myself. So I hate nuclear weapons. I want a world without nuclear weapons. But as I've said before, if both the United States and Israel, who both have nuclear weapons, are attacking Iran, what is the argument against Iran having nuclear weapons? You really have to work hard to persuade me of the logic of that. And as I said earlier, North Korea is a good case in point. I'm going to call a halt to the poll. 21,099 people have voted, and roughly speaking, 78-79% of you think that the Iran ceasefire is dead. You can listen to the weekly podcast at moats.tv. Once you've listened, please don't forget to rate and review the podcast. It helps people become more aware of us. This week, our podcast is in the top 10 for politics in Montenegro, the Gambia, Zimbabwe, and the United Arab Emirates, and in the top 30 for politics in Bulgaria, Oman, Cyprus, and Uruguay. Truly amazing statistics. Thanks to everyone who watches, listens, subscribes, shares the program. And let's go to Yasser in Quebec, in Canada, on my good friend Imran Khan. Go ahead, Yasser.
Bonjour, Mr. Galloway. Thank you so much for taking my call. I'm calling to highlight the plight of Imran Khan. You obviously stand out in giving him attention and coverage throughout this ordeal. As you know, he was arrested on August 5th, 2023. He's been charged with hundreds of fake, phony, fraudulent cases. And finally, they decided to arrest him and put him in prison when they weren't able to control him. And his health has deteriorated decidedly. He's in very bad health right now. As you're surely aware, that rumors are that he has lost sight in one of his eyes owing to a clot. There are rumors swirling that he's been slow poisoned. He's being slow poisoned in the prison. And finally, the kangaroo courts, they have unfortunately been rendered kangaroo courts, decided to give him this authorization to be treated at a hospital yesterday. And there's still, back and forth going on between this dictatorial regime that is ruling Pakistan, a barbaric, brutal regime. And even though there is a civilian facade, as you know very well, it's led by the so-called field marshal or the field marshal, who is anointed and appointed himself field marshal. So I just wanted to take the liberty of requesting you to please continue to highlight the plight of Imran Khan.
I'm glad you gave me the opportunity to do so. It's an ill wind that blows nobody any good, and one of the consequences of the toing and froing is that Imran Khan's name is once again on the lips of the political class, the media class, and his plight, which seemed to be drifting to the shores of the forgotten, is now right back up there as a hot political potato. The dictatorship in Pakistan is no longer able to pretend that Imran Khan does not exist. Exist he does. The High Court with a three-man bench, because no one judge is prepared to take the risk of making such a judgment alone. A three-man bench ordered the regime to release Imran Khan to hospital until September, roughly speaking, a month of hospitalization. I think the Shifa hospital was designated. This is because, by whatever means, they have slow tortured or slow poisoned Imran Khan almost to death. His health reports were so bad, they had to stop allowing those reports to be published. They had to stop allowing the doctors to see Imran, his children to phone Imran, his sisters to visit Imran, all in defiance of High Court decisions in Pakistan. So I'm not his party man. I didn't support his party, and I, frankly, given how many of them have let him down and turned Lota, I'm very glad I didn't support them. But I am an Imran Khan man. He's a friend of mine. I respect him, love him, and I will never be silent about his plight. If he is successfully released to the hospital, I very much hope that the hospital staff look after him, and I very much hope that it is a stepping stone to the release of a man whose only crime was to make clear he would not support American war, either against Russia or against Afghanistan. Imran Khan is the rightful Prime Minister of Pakistan. He was unlawfully ousted, overthrown, by an American coup d'etat. And if anyone thinks, because I'm not a fan of the PTI, I'm going to remain silent on such a series of events, they don't know me at all. Now, please don't forget our big fundraising effort for Erebos. We're only looking for £3,000 to get Erebos back up on his feet and with access to the internet and somewhere to lay his head. He's been sleeping in a chair for quite some considerable time with quite some considerable health impact. So there we are. We're at 2,000, I think that says 192, but I'm not, my eyesight's not that great and I can't see it. We hit 2,070 half an hour ago. Can we get to 3,000 by the end of the night? I really hope so. We've had £100 or so in the last 10 minutes. So help Erebos continue his sharp, articulate contributions to the mother of all talk shows. Let's go to Ohio, where Joe wants to talk about the US Green Party. Oh, I've let myself in for it now, Joe. Go ahead.
Hi, George. Thanks for taking my call again. I spoke with you a couple of weeks ago about Tucker Carlson, but today, I'd like to talk to you about the Green Party of the United States and the problem that we have today in the United States. The biggest problem is that the Democratic Party and the Republican Party has been totally overrun with fascist Zionist war criminals today. And that's what we have to fix in the United States in order to end the ugly U.S. wars for oil and the ugly U.S. regime change wars for oil. The fact is, Zionists are not welcome in the Green Party of the United States, and Green Party candidates do not take any Zionist money, and they don't take any AIPAC money, and they don't take corporate money either. That's something a Green Party candidate has to pledge to do in order to run for office with the Green Party. Now, the fact is, we have to overthrow our government by peacefully electing the next Green Party candidate as our President of the United States, because the next Green Party candidate will have the ability to veto the funding for the U.S. wars that are taking place all across the globe today.
Yeah, okay. Joe, I respect your sincerity, but we've now had the ACP and now the U.S. Green Party. We can't go on like this. But the truth is, this is pie in the sky. By all means, build the U.S. Green Party. I'm not advocating for a new party in the United States. I'm advocating for a new movement in the United States so that we can stop the war, so that we can still be alive in order to argue about green, not green, left or right or center, liberal, conservative, communist. I want for us to stay alive to actually discuss and debate these things and find a way forward. But we need right now a movement, an electoral movement that all shades of opinion can get behind and support. And I'm here to tell you that Tucker Carlson has more chance of being elected President of the United States than anybody in the U.S. Green Party. And if you're being honest with yourself, you'll agree with me on that. Look, another round of recognition must go to more of tonight's top-most supporters. So a big thanks to Paul Tham, to Phil Dixon, Jim Hamilton, Terry Kavanagh, and Don Elliott. A big thanks to every one of you. I hope every one of you will not leave me tonight without dropping at least a pound, a euro, or a dollar in my hat, as you would if you'd listened to me busking for 2 hours in the street. So, last call, not able to get connected with Gayatri's camera, unfortunately, but she'll be back, God willing, on Sunday. Annette is in Canada, on Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, and Turkey. And she's the last call. Go ahead, Annette.
Hi, George. Thank you very much for taking my call. I have been a long-time listener here, and I appreciate your show and your time. I just wanted to say that regarding the coalition or agreement or pact that these three sovereign Muslim countries that have taken, I'm wondering if they're so quickly able to put a coalition together regarding which we don't even know whether it's against Israel or for Israel, because that's never really come out as yet. How come they didn't do something about Palestine? And why does Egypt stand by?
I knew you were going to say that, Annette. And it's a very perspicacious observation. I think you already know the answer. Turkey was attacked by Israel today in an airbase in Syria. Israel, yesterday, bombed, hoping they would kill Turkish personnel in an airbase in Syria, in Idlib, near Idlib. Now, leaving aside whether Turkey should have air bases in Syria, who gave the Syrian regime the right to give away Syria's national territory, not just to Turkey, but to Israel, leaving all these matters aside. As far as I know, this new alliance has disappeared backwards through the hedge as soon as the Israeli bombardment began. Now, I'm not against Muslim countries uniting in military political alliances. On the contrary, I'm in favor of it. But it does beg the question you've just asked. Why didn't you do that when hundreds of thousands of children, women, men were being massacred in Gaza? And secondly, what are you going to do if Israel confronts you? You going to war? Well, Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, and to a lesser extent Turkey are definitely not going to go to war against Israel. To that extent, they're not really a military alliance at all, or at least they're a military alliance that's facing only one way. It is a military alliance against other Muslim countries. That's the suspicion, anyway. It's yet to be proved in practice. But the Pakistan Army's main purpose is to suppress its own people and throw its own rightful Prime Minister, Imran Khan, into a dungeon and then slow torture him until, God forbid, the death. It's been marvelous for me. Thanks very much indeed for watching the show. Just outside my window is the Great Wall of China. And very soon, the sun will be rising in the east, as indeed it does every day until the end of time. I look forward to seeing you on Sunday. Good night.
It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. Go get 'em, George.